Hello and welcome to today's RIMS webinar, sponsored by Global Risk Consultants, a TÜV-sued company. This session is Mastering Property Renewals, Strategies for Success in 2025 with Risk Engineering. I am Justin Smullison, Business Content Manager here at RIMS, the Risk and Insurance Management Society. A few quick notes before we get started. If you have a question for the presenters during today's session, please submit them by writing in the question box. The Global Risk Consultants team will reply to you directly after this session. Following the session, the recording will be available through the on-demand events page of rims.org, and all downloads and contact information will be accessible to the sponsor. And on with today's presentation, which is Mastering Property Renewals, Strategies for Success in 2025 with Risk Engineering. RIMS is thrilled to welcome a large global audience, and now I will hand it off to our moderator, Global Risk Consultants Marketing Manager, Jared Shelley.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. As Justin said, my name is Jared Shelley, and I'm the head of marketing for Global Risk Consultants. Today, we've got a message for you. Don't be lulled into a false sense of security by the softening property insurance market. After nearly 7 years of consistent rate hikes, the market is finally easing up, but not everyone agrees on the extent. For example, Marsh reported a modest 2% rise in property insurance rates for Q2 2024, while the Council of Insurance Agents and Brokers shows a steeper increase of 8.9% for the same period. Meanwhile, Market Scout says property rates increased 5.7% in Q3. Yes, the property market is moving towards stabilization, but here's the catch. It's still extremely challenging for businesses in certain industries and locations, and underwriters are scrutinizing every detail. It means now is the time to learn how independent risk engineering and proactive loss control can give you a competitive edge in renewal negotiations. We know there are people tuned into today's webinar who have a lot more knowledge than us about the current market. But we want to give you a sense of what we are hearing from our clients, and they are risk managers at some of the world's most successful companies, and how those risk managers are using risk engineering to make a big difference. In this webinar, you'll learn how to uncover hidden hazards, identify flaws in risk mitigation strategies, and implement proactive solutions to make your submission more attractive to insurers. We'll also explore real-life stories about how brokers and risk managers improved renewal outcomes through data-driven risk mitigation, and how to leverage advanced data and analytics to persuade underwriters to deliver more affordable rates, better coverage, and favorable terms while attracting more carriers and capacity to the placement process. Today's speakers are experts in the field and have years of experience helping some of the world's most successful companies manage risks. David Ricks is Global Sales Manager at Global Risk Consultants. David has deep experience in risk engineering and business insurance. He's an expert in food and beverage, power generation, and many other industries, with years of experience helping companies protect against risks like fire or machinery breakdown. David previously spent 22 years in leadership positions at Marsh. He spent 8 years with Willis and joined GRC in 2018. Charlie Carricker is Strategic Sales Manager of Project Services at Global Risk Consultants. Charlie has over 20 years of fire protection and risk consulting experience, helping clients navigate their property insurance programs. Charlie has a unique skill set combining building and fire code requirements with practical risk mitigation strategies. Charlie spent over 15 years with Aon Fire Protection Engineering and joined GRC in 2016. And once again, I'm Jared, head of marketing at GRC. Today's webinar will be conducted interview style. I'll ask David and Charlie questions to get a free-flowing conversation started. I encourage you to ask questions as well by putting them in the question box on your screen. Now, due to scheduling, we can't answer them live, but we're committed to answering each and every one. In fact, we will put together a Q&A document with detailed answers to all of your questions and distribute it in a few days. Now for my first question. I'll go with you, David. What is independent property risk engineering?
Okay, thanks, Jared. Yeah, let's start at the very top with, I guess, a very basic definition of what is independent property risk engineering. It's a fire and/or a machinery breakdown assessment of a facility, of a factory, where the engineer is going out there to identify the hazards, gather all the COPE information for the location, ultimately develop recommendations for risk reduction, and also document many of the positive aspects of what the company is doing to manage property risk. As I said, it's independent, so this is done by a third party, and that it typically means that the perception is that it's going to be unbiased. It doesn't have the lens or potential bias of a broker or a carrier report that might have a particular perspective. So the other piece of it is that I think this is probably very important for many of our clients is that they actually own that process. They actually own all that data. And so they have a lot more control than they might have if they're using more of a traditional model relying on the insurance company for property risk data. So that's probably the most critical difference between independent risk engineering and carrier-based risk engineering. We thought it might be important right now just to kind of highlight some changes that we've seen just in our world at GRC, just changes in the marketplace. And this is really, fairly recently, let's say since COVID. And I think probably many of you have seen this. Certainly insurance companies and brokers have seen it. We have, and that's just a lot more demand for our services. Obviously, the market is driving a lot of that activity as clients look for, different programs and their remarketing and the like. But it's been significant, and there's been a real challenge for firms like ourselves, for many others, to continue to grow and attract engineers, to train engineers. We've even started a training program internally. We're developing associates to kind of learn over time, and that was really the only way we felt we could start to meet the demand for more engineers. So just be mindful of that as you look towards 2025 in your strategy. Just understand that the marketplace is pretty stretched in certain situations, and certainly for real specific industries and more technical risks, it might be even more acute. So, a lot of this, as you guys know, as brokers, as risk managers, many carriers, particularly for certain industries, not wanting to put up as much capacity as they had in the past. That means you've got to attract more capacity, and that means you're going to need really good risk engineering. So that's what's driving this, as I said. Anything that's got losses, anything that's CAT exposed, of course, is going to get scrutinized more heavily. So you're going to need to have good information and good perspective on those locations. And so we'll talk more about this last point as we go through today's conversation. But what we've seen with many of our clients, some of the best brokers and risk managers, they're really taking a lot of extra steps in this market and in this environment to really showcase what's positive, what's proactive about that company, why they're best in class. Not entirely dwelling on what's wrong, what needs to be improved. Sure, that's part of the discussion, but it's really going to great lengths to tell the story properly and ultimately put the risk profile of the company in the best possible light in the current environment. So just at a very high level, those are definitely some trends and changes we've seen, as I said, over the past few years. And then finally here, just sort of an intro. It's interesting. GRC is started way back in the late 50s, and this is sort of the origins, frankly, of unbundled and independent risk engineering. It all started from really the first captives that were formed here in the United States for large industrial companies in the late 50s and early 60s, part of American Risk. Go back that far. So very much the origins of independent risk engineering from the very first day were there to support owners, were to support risk managers and take ownership of the process of risk engineering so that there was in many cases, a multi-year strategy to improve the risk profile of an organization. So over the years, that's expanded and GRC ultimately has grown out of that, and many other unbundled options are available as well. But that's sort of a little quick history lesson on independent risk engineering.
Great. Thank you, David. And Charlie, what feedback are you getting from clients as they prepare for 2025 renewals?
Jared, as we're now approaching the end of October, we have definitely began the conversations with not only 1/1 renewals, but end of Q1, early Q2 clients that are getting ready for their submittal. Kind consistently we're hearing back from them that the need for real-time data and analytics is at an all-time high. Uh, these are not only periodic updates that they would provide to the markets, to their broker, but also internal stakeholders. As they're providing their report up, there is an increased demand for all that data that David was talking about as being collected during the fire visits. Um, the data is one thing, and they also, most of our clients have their own internal REMIS system. And having an API that connects into your risk engineering data and allows you to bring that into your system for potential evaluation with AI tools. There's many things out there that allow our clients to um, do their own analysis to see what the data is telling them. I have a couple clients actually that get a nightly update from our system so that the information in their REMIS system regarding the risk engineering is always up to date. You know, all of our clients as well are talking about the NAT has exposures that they have, the need for that data that's being collected to include secondary perils. We see a dramatic increase in severe convective storms. We're seeing increased floods, windstorms. All of the NatCat exposed facilities are getting that additional scrutiny that was mentioned early in the discussion. All the reports are great, and they are going to include risk improvement recommendations, but sometimes it's important to be able to prioritize those. Um, the feedback we're getting from our clients is about the importance of including account engineering in their program and the value that that's providing by helping them prioritize, develop a return on investment, and really understanding what they can do internally to better themselves for the upcoming renewal. David, I think you had some other things that you wanted to share as well.
Yeah. Well, and I do want to reiterate what you said right at the very top there, Charlie. I think is super important. So, maybe as you're looking at 2025 and your strategy, you might want to think about, we've seen quite a few customers ask for mid-year updates, just sort of unsolicited and proactively, giving the market an update on the risk engineering program mid-year or quarterly, depending on what's involved, showing them what's being done real time. And not just make it sort of an annual thing that you kind of do, 60 days before the renewal and it's in just sort of a finite area. So give some thought to, really being more proactive with the markets and giving them more periodic updates on the program. The ability to move the information around quickly allows many of our customers to do that. Other things that we think are super important. We're going to talk a lot about loss expectancy at key locations, so I'll come back to that. Don't forget about human element recommendations. This is the so-called low-hanging fruit. Doesn't cost a lot of money typically to implement these recommendations. We have a client, a large tech company in the Texas area. They pride themselves on closing out any human element recommendation within 30 days generally. And they can document it. And so that's quite powerful when it comes to, demonstrating to the market what the risk culture is at that company. That's a good way to prove it right there. And so, small things like that can be really, really important and add up as you look at your strategy for next year. Goes without saying, I think we all know on this call that values are being scrutinized. Inflation has caused that, undervaluation in many cases, as losses have proven. So, it's important to us, and it's because these drive the loss expectancies. So back to the point above. We offer valuation service because we can see sometimes when we do the fire inspection that perhaps the building value looks a little low. We know that will affect the loss expectancy. So just also understand that the values are important for your LEs as well, not just for the overall program. One other thing, this is sort of similar to the human element side. Don't lose sight of other things your company may be doing that's kind of complementary to core property risk engineering. It might be stuff like process safety, a very robust infrared thermography program, for example. All of these should also be brought forward into the discussion, with your stakeholders on the program. For a food and beverage account, and we'll talk about that industry in a little bit, dust hazard can be really, really important. So having having good controls around that and making sure you don't have open recommendations for that can be really, really important for your program. And so as we're going to talk to you over and over again, demonstrating that risk improvement over time is a really key thing that we see the successful companies doing.
Great. Thanks for those answers, guys. Really appreciate it. Um, so, Charlie, what trends and hot topics are the business leaders that you deal with all the time? What are they identifying as 2025 approaches?
Yeah, so David and I compared notes from our recent conversations with clients, and we came up with these 8 items that are on screen now. I'm going to focus on two on the far left, and I think there's something David will be pointing out as well. But you'll see flood and AFFF. So where I'm located here in central North Carolina, we were recently hit with Hurricane Helene, which caused excessive and massive flooding in our mountain region. Some of these areas weren't originally, flood prone, or they may be experiencing that 100-year, 200-year flood. And that is driving a lot of the conversations now because we're seeing floods and natural hazard events creating issues in areas that aren't traditionally considered cat exposed. The other item here on the left is that AFFF. Man, so many of my clients have multiple fire protection systems that include the foam system in there. And with the new requirements for fluorine-free foam, a lot of them are asking how they're going to replace them. What is their next step? How are they going to make sure that the hazard is protected while also meeting some regulatory requirements regarding the contents of the system? This is an evolving topic that I think as 2025 comes, more of the testing will be completed, more of the analysis and guidance is going to be provided so that we can, in turn, provide better engineering as well as guidance for the clients. David, was there one you was wanting to highlight?
Yeah. Well, since I'm based in Central Texas, I thought I'd talk about renewables and specifically severe convective storm for solar projects. That might be for a very specific audience, but if anyone in this presentation in this webinar has that type of exposure, is developing, renewables projects, certainly risk engineering will probably be one of the most important strategies that you'll have for getting that program placed. And specifically for new solar projects, for new wind projects, depending on what peril it's exposed to. If it's in Texas, it's SCS. Typically, in order to get bankability, to get project financing through the Inflation Reduction Act and through tax equity partners, you need to have a structural engineering report and assessment done of the severe convective storm risk for that project, usually involving a number of return periods, 250 years, 500 years, et cetera. So without that report, the banks are not willing typically to lend and set up the financing. There also may be some rather onerous requirements for high limits of coverage for that particular peril. So be mindful if you've got any renewable projects to start early and really engage experts. That certainly includes battery energy storage systems, which oftentimes are part of these projects. The standards are evolving for fire protection for battery energy storage systems, so definitely engage an expert and understand the exposure. And even before you build the project, make sure that you've got your arms around the loss control piece of it.
Okay, thanks for those answers, guys. Let's move on to the next question here. You both had mentioned data quite a bit, and I just want to ask directly, how is risk engineering data being used to present the best possible risk profile to insurance markets?
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I'll start with this. There's no one size fits all. Each situation is usually customized. So what we wanted to discuss today are just, typically what we see, typically what we do when we're helping customers kind of prepare for the marketplace. But before I jump into that, let me just maybe share a story. I was recently attended the Western Region RIMS conference, beautiful Sun River, Oregon. It was a great conference. And I attended a panel discussion with a number of property experts. Property underwriter was on the panel, and he was responsible for the western region of the U.S. This is a larger, well-known property carrier. He has a team based in Los Angeles of, I think, 8 underwriters. And he expressed that over the last 12 months, they had received 11,000 property submissions in for review for a team of 8. And so, he basically said that it's not physically possible to review that many submissions. What really caught our attention, and I thought this might be of interest to the audience, is that they're using an AI tool to review the intake of submissions to determine the level of quality and completeness there is in terms of the information that's being submitted for underwriting review. And so if it doesn't meet a certain standard for this underwriting outfit, they basically don't review it. If it looks complete, then it gets a human review. So he estimated that probably less than 20% of those submissions actually gets reviewed. So sort of the point of this is to really make sure that you have a strategy when it comes to getting the best possible submission pulled together for your renewal for your clients if you're a broker. And a lot of this is, and what I'm going to get into in just a second, is sort of a checklist to kind of give you an example or two of what we would pull together in kind of a dashboard or an exhibit. But oftentimes it's focused heavily on what about the risk ratings for this client, which locations are critical, lots of understanding and a lot of dialogue around what's developed the loss expectancy, what goes into that, so that underwriters can really grasp that quickly. Charlie touched on this, but we definitely see an increasing desire for many customers to be able to transfer their risk engineering data efficiently and maybe via API to other platforms, AI platforms, insurtech platforms that they're using for their program. So that might be something that you should consider as you look towards your strategy for the future. If you see that need, definitely some prep work's involved for that. And the other thing that I would just stress, and I'll come back to this a couple of times, is that the account engineer on your account or the person with that expertise is really a great person to have involved in as you develop your strategy to kind of with their insight be able to develop help you to develop a strategy that makes sense for your own organization. It's really focused on the risk issues that are likely to get the most attention as you handle your program next year. A key piece of this, and Jared's going to show a couple of examples as we move forward here, is using data. In many cases, we're now using Power BI tools, just a Microsoft Business Intelligence tool, to develop dashboards to really tell that story, as I was talking about earlier. And these are just generic screenshots of exhibits that come out of our database. But here's a Power BI dashboard that and as you'll see on my checklist that comes up next, really brings forward some data points that underwriters like to see. A lot of risk managers use this also internally with other stakeholders to get CapEx and budget for certain risk improvement. So, it's a way for risk managers to show internally that the program is performing, that it's driving value, that it's reducing risk, it's protecting the balance sheet, all of the above. So, and then on the next slide, I'll show you the checklist that we put together. And this isn't all inclusive by any means, but what you might see if you engage independent risk engineering, and they really are your adjunct as you get into the renewal process. They'll be developing a recap of all the inspections that have been completed on a month-by-month basis to be able to show the markets that this is being done on a daily basis. Exhibits to show how risk ratings have improved year over year based on the recommendations that are being completed. And this can be very granular in Power BI, where you can click on that facility and it'll actually bring up exactly what was improved and what was remedied. So it's very real time and much more interactive than a PowerPoint slide that's a little more static. A really powerful slide that we've developed and many customers use to really identify outliers is to take the anticipated probable loss, the APL, that's also known as the normal loss expectancy, and marry that with the facility risk rating for that specific location. And so if you've got a high APL and a very low risk rating, that's an outlier that likely is going to get some attention. So it's a really nice tool to give you a way to look visually at the program and help to develop a strategy. A key part of everything is obviously going through what's been done, what's outstanding, and really what does that mean from an LE standpoint. So make sure you really have your a good handle on that. We typically create a summary of recommendation impact, and this is very simply put into low, moderate, and high. And I know, Charlie, you do a lot of this for your customers. Maybe I'll let you cover these last few.
Yeah, absolutely, David. As you were talking about the recommendations, the client wants to know kind of the impact. If we correct this, or what impact does this have on my LE? Is it a low hazard, a moderate, or even a high? And they use that information to help with budgeting their CapEx for remedying some of the recommendations. I also have some clients that use this type of dashboard to track their internal responses. Not only do they want to know that there's a recommendation, they want the facility to acknowledge that. And they can do that by providing a response within the system. And then we can report that back out to the markets as well as the internal stakeholders. Next to the bottom there, again, we're talking about NatHaz. I know it's a consistent topic and it will continue to be. But we've had success and had some positive feedback during our meetings when we separate out the facilities that have the increased NatHaz exposure, so that you can look at that as part of the portfolio on its own, as well as looking at the other facilities. Last but not least, the project and plan reviews. The best time to prevent a recommendation when we're doing a fire survey is to get the issue addressed during the project design and construction. So our clients find a large value into getting their projects looked at early, and then continuing that review on through the actual construction to make sure that the implementation of the project matches the design, which in turn matches their internal standards, protocols, and best risk management practices.
Great, thanks. Charlie, let's stay with you for this next question. What are your top recommendations for engaging risk engineering for 2025 programs?
So, Jared, we put together a list of about 6 things here on this next slide. And, we want to focus on developing a program that really matches and addresses your unique business and industry risk. I think David said earlier, there's not a one size fits all, and that definitely applies to an overall risk engineering program. Make sure that the items that are included, whether that be infrared, whether that be a dust hazard analysis, make sure that it's meeting what the market is concerned about with your facilities. And also make sure that it matches your internal risk management culture. I don't think we can say this enough, that we need to start the process early. So we definitely want to recommend that is part of your plan going into 2025. We were recently contacted for some engineering services for a prospect that was about 60 days out from their renewal. While we were able to assist them and provide some good engineering data, some good reports for them, they could have had a more holistic program had they been started a little bit early. So it would be our recommendation that if you can start 6 months early at the minimum, but go ahead and get in front of this. Don't let it sneak up on you. Focusing on those critical locations. Every industry will have, or every company will have locations that are critical. Some of them are very obvious and some of them are not. Maybe it's an internal supply chain type deal that you need to make sure that the critical locations for you are included in your program. And also that whatever risk that location presents, we're getting a good view of it and a good track record of risk improvement for that area. Loss expectancies, they're going to definitely impact and affect how the underwriting community is looking at your portfolio. Understand them, know how you can improve them, and have a plan in place. If you have outstanding issues, make sure that you're addressing those, or at least you have that plan to get that done in the near future. We find that when you present your program and you have a good grasp of what issues are there that have been identified, and then you can also follow that up with a plan in place to make your or to implement risk reduction, is a lot more favorable feedback whenever you're getting your submittal back. And here again, show the underwriters that you take risk reduction seriously. Show them that this is not a one-time um, effort, that it's an ongoing culture that you have instituted within your facility. There's really nothing that counteracts the consistency. Make sure you're showing a consistent approach to your overall risk management program.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. And before I get to my next question, I just want to once again remind the audience to submit questions via the question box on your screen. We can't answer them today due to scheduling, but we are going to answer them via email in a Q&A document we're going to send to all the webinar registrants. So you won't just get an answer to your question, you'll get an answer to all of them. So might be a nice resource for you taking away after this. So please get those questions in. We're really excited to prepare that and deliver it. My next question is for David. How important, David, is consistency in presenting risk improvements year over year to your underwriter?
Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Jared. So consistency is really important in terms of your overall program. We've been hearing some of this even more so this last year. Clients challenged with consistency for the risk engineering program, maybe on a global basis. So as you look to your strategy in 2025, some of what I mentioned before, there's a high demand, a lot of submissions, a lot of remarketing being done. So you're going to need to have a world-class submission, and one of the things that can detract from that is if that you have different engineering approaches for different facilities that might be very similar in terms of what they do, and so that can create a lot of confusion in the marketplace and maybe not lead to the best outcome. We've heard from clients, some that have been with a program for quite a bit of time, that just due to turnover, due to changes, they've lost that consistency globally. So they're looking for other options. They see different engineers come into their facilities that don't take the same approach as the engineer that came in the previous time. So that can be extremely frustrating for customers. It can make the broker's job a lot more difficult to pull together a cohesive submission that is consistent in terms of developing the risk engineering program and all the metrics for underwriting purposes for that. So nothing can be more frustrating than that for a risk manager than seeing a loss expectancy being done differently at two identical locations. That can really be problematic. So just be mindful of consistency in your program as you look forward to 2025 is the point of this slide.
Great. Thank you, David. And, Charlie, how does unbundling risk engineering from insurance give risk managers an edge?
Jared, we put together the slide that kind of compares and contrasts a bundled program, which is typically carrier driven, versus an unbundled program, which is more risk manager customized driven. And as you can tell in the two photos and the pieces of the slide that we have here, the focus is really on ownership. With an unbundled program using an independent risk engineering team, it allows you to have control over the program, not just in what's being done, not just in what locations are being met, but it also gives you control and ownership of the data and what you do with the data, how you in turn use that to paint the picture, to put together the assessment of your portfolio is really all in your control. So what we have found recently is that more and more of our teams are leveraging the fact that they are unbundled to be able to give theirself the competitive edge in this current marketplace.
Great. Thank you, Charlie. And David, how is risk engineering, used if a company isn't unbundled? You can still do this, right?
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I mean, so we generally see two different types of programs at GRC. We see what Charlie just described. We have customers that have unbundled programs. These can be large customers. They can have captives. They can be taking significant retentions. Maybe global programs. So they certainly have some scale, and they want to take ownership of the process. That's what Charlie just described in terms of what an unbundled program is. The other type of program that we see at GRC are clients coming to us, brokers or risk managers, companies. They may not have the scale, or they may not actually go unbundled at their renewal, but they want to have quality, independent risk engineering, and they want to invest in that because they want to showcase to the market everything that they're doing well when it comes to risk management. They want to spend the money so that submission winds up at the top of the stack, attracting more capacity to the placement process. It's a way to show to the market that you're serious about the renewal, that you've made the investment in engineering, and that you work very collaboratively then with the independent engineer to make sure the loss estimates are realistic and accurate, and that all the good things that are being done by that company is brought forward in the report. So we see that really is critical, and it certainly is the case on a couple of industries that we're going to talk about in the next slide. These really typically drive even more reason to have a lot of focus on the risk engineering program. So if you're thinking of remarketing in 2025, think about potentially using independent risk engineering to showcase what's going well with your program, to make that investment so that you can get the best possible outcome in the renewal.
Great. Thank you, David. And Charlie, which industries are seeing the most demand for risk engineering?
Really all of them, Jared, but we've focused in on this list that you're showing on the slide now. And um, primarily with food and beverage, what we see from their demand is being driven by needs for dust hazard analysis or the controls that they have in place around the dust hazards. There's also processes involved with the food and bev industry, but really all processing industries as a whole are seeing a greater need, and there's a bigger demand for them. Some examples of where we're working within the processing industries are pharmaceuticals, steel and aluminum, textiles, amongst others. From a chemical industry perspective, the paintings and coatings and also the warehousing of those chemicals is creating some unique risk that is driving the demand for increased data, increased information on those particular industries. The last one that I'm going to cover, and I'll pass it over to David, is power generation. The traditional methods of power generation are still a hot industry that is needing the risk engineering. But I think, as David is going to show you, we're also seeing a lot of work coming in from the renewables.
Yeah, that's right. That's where we've seen the greatest uptick is with solar and wind projects. As I said, battery energy storage systems. This is really globally, but particularly here in the United States, we're seeing a significant amount of demand. And you need specialty engineering for this typically. So be mindful if you've got any of these, if you're in this industry or have any of these exposures. The other one that really stands out, this is a fairly big part of what we do on the GRC side. We do a lot of wood and pulp and paper, very specific industry expertise, particularly pulp and paper with black liquor recovery boilers and a very heavy boiler machinery component to it, similar to mining in many ways, which is also a very unique industry sector. So definitely be mindful if you're in one of these industries. You likely will certainly need to have a robust risk engineering strategy going forward for your program.
Great. Thank you. And now, Charlie, can you and David, both of you, can you give us some takeaways as we end our presentation?
Yeah, if we haven't mentioned it already, we highly recommend that you start the process early. That's going to give you the most time to prepare and get your data. Also, it gives you more time to analyze that data, put it in a digestible format for the markets. Again, make sure that your program meets your needs. Each industry and business, they have their own unique property risk management needs. Make sure your program meets what you need. And then finally, that I'm going to cover will be telling your risk story through data. It's very critical to take this copious amount of data. And, we've all heard that a picture's worth 1,000 words. But in this case, a picture's really worth about 1,000 data points. Let's make sure that the data that you've invested in is able to tell the story that you want to the markets.
Yeah, Charlie, all of that's definitely top of mind. I think what I want to leave with is just, reiterating the importance of really thinking strategically about risk engineering in 2025. I get a lot of inquiries in, Charlie does, and I can tell you just by the way they come in that risk engineering likely was an afterthought in the process. It's like, oh my gosh, we're 60 days out and we don't have good engineering. What do we do? And that's not a good place to be. And so, if I could impart anything on the audience today, obviously, as Charlie started with, start early, but maybe as importantly, if not more importantly, think strategically and really work with your partners, work internally with your external partners, your broker, and others to really make sure you've got a sound strategy in place. This is probably a good year to really take advantage of a more stabilized market. And if you put risk engineering front and center, I think you'll be surprised at the positive outcome you'll receive.
All right. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, David. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Remember, we'll be in touch with detailed answers to all of your questions via email. And so if you have any other questions, just type them right in, and we'll be able to get to them and answer them shortly. And if you'd like to contact any of our speakers, our contact information is on the screen now. You can also email us at email-us@tuvsud.com. And for more information about trends in risk engineering and loss control, check out our website, tuvsud.com/GRC, or follow us on LinkedIn. And now back to Justin for a final word.
Special thanks to Charlie Carricker, David Ricks, and Jared Shelley of Global Risk Consultants for their time and expertise. The GRC team has your questions and will reply to you directly if we didn't address them today. A copy of this webinar will be archived through the on-demand events page of rims.org within a few business days. And folks, there are lots of resources for you all to access. Find them at tuvsud.com/GRC. You can find TUVSUD Global Risk Consultants through their LinkedIn page. And the next webinar collaboration between RIMS and GRC will be December 5th. It is titled Predictive Strategies to Detect Electrical and Machinery Failures. The link to that webinar is now in the chat box. And of course, visit rims.org/webinars to register. Finally, RIMS is global, and we would love for you to build your network with us. Visit rims.org/membership to apply for a RIMS membership. Thank you all, and stay safe.